Here I come. Hello, music fans, music collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I'm your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquit, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490am.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. You can also catch this show live on Alexa by saying, Alexa, play KMET Radio for your listening pleasure. On the telephone line this morning, I welcome to the program live on air, author, karate master, Elvis Presley's personal bodyguard. I welcome in the great David Hebler. David, Brian C., honor to speak with you, sir.
Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, David. Dave, you are considered a master of Kenpo Karate. Can you tell and talk a little bit about what Kenpo Karate is for our audience?
Yeah, Kenpo Karate is a style of karate, very much like you would say car and automobile, well, what kind of car and what kind of automobile. Same thing with karate. It has various different styles. Our style is called Kenpo, and we feature two things, speed and multiplicity of movement and practical applications in the real world.
So it totally differs from like the Taekwondo jiu-jitsu style, huh?
Yeah, somewhat, yeah. Shotokan actually, or Taekwondo actually is what you mentioned. They emphasize feet. Almost, they're like 70-30 feet to hands, and we're the opposite. We're about 30% feet and about 70% hands.
It's very interesting. David, what got you interested in martial arts? At what age did your journey begin in martial arts?
Well, I was initially interested in judo, and I was in the Air Force at the time, stationed at March Air Force Base in Southern California. And there were a number of Hawaiian guys in my squadron who were doing some kind of workout that they called Kenpo Karate, and I got a chance to start working out with them, and I liked it quite a bit. And this was in 1958. The following year, when I was getting out of the Air Force, I enrolled in school in Pasadena, California, at Pasadena City College. And on the recommendation of my Hawaiian friends, I drove up the street from the college and met the founder of American Kenpo Karate, Ed Parker, at his studio. And he and I conversed for a while. He took me out on the mats. He showed me some amazing stuff, and I knew right then and there this is what I wanted to do, and I signed up right on the spot.
Well, now you also taught the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. How did you first meet Elvis Presley?
I was working out with some friends of mine at Ed Parker's school in Santa Monica, California, and we were having a good time, working out, beating each other up, having a good time. And I noticed a commotion at the door. And I turned and looked, and in walked, oh, my God, Elvis Presley. And I'm thinking at the time, what was he doing here? Actually, what he was doing there is he ended up coming out on the mats and working out with us, and I was assigned as his training partner, to help him through the material and things that we were doing, and we had a great time. And I guess he liked it a lot because the next day he invited me and Ed Parker up to his house in Beverly Hills and proceeded to give me a Mercedes.
Wow. So now how long was that after you gave him, a couple of classes? He got you Mercedes-Benz?
No, before I ever taught him a class.
So you instantly, so you instantly struck a relationship. He obviously felt very comfortable with you.
Yeah, we did. I found out later on that I used to do a technique that was a compilation of moves, some 13 different moves. And I was able in those days to do those 13 moves in about 2 seconds. And this impressed the hell out of Elvis because he thought I was the fastest guy that ever lived. In fact, he nicknamed me the Mongoose, to give you an idea. But he was so fascinated with that technique that he wanted to do it himself. He wanted to learn how to do that. So that was the start of it, and 4 years. That lasted 4 years, actually.
Wow. So some of those early clips of Elvis in the 70s, when he's on stage doing his karate moves, like when he's moving his hands. So those type of moves he learned from you.
Some of them, yes. Elvis. What people don't know is that Elvis was actually a martial artist his entire adult life, in one form or another. And he actually had access to, some of the greatest martial arts instructors in the world. But I'm the one that he chose to be his personal bodyguard. So I'm the one that was available, for training sessions a lot more often than any of the other folks may have been. And so my influence with him was a lot more personal and a lot longer.
Now, how was Elvis as a student of the art? Did he listen well, learn quickly? He had good technique.
He Elvis had. You got to understand, his situation was really unique. I mean, he couldn't go train at a karate school like you and I could. I mean, it was everywhere he went, there was instant, mayhem everywhere. And so that made it, impossible for him to really train in that environment. And that environment is pretty important to anybody, training. But we did have occasions to work together on various techniques and moves. And, he, if you look at the early days, Elvis had a pretty good body, I mean, he could have had a great one, actually. But his circumstances were such that he couldn't train like you and I could train. So you have to take that into context when you do it. But he could have been a good one. I used to say, and I still say, Elvis Presley was the greatest entertainer who ever lived. He was not the greatest martial artist who ever lived. And that's okay. I'm not the greatest martial artist who ever lived either.
Well, I mean, you do have definitely impressive credentials. Now, I read, David, that you weren't a fan of Elvis's music. You preferred Chuck Berry, Antoine Fats Domino. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, that's true. I was a big jazz fan. People like Gene Krupa and people like that who were jazz artists were my early influences because you got to remember I grew up in the 40s and 50s, so that was the musical influence. And then Elvis came along, and of course I appreciated him as a performer. I liked his songs. But I really wasn't a huge fan until the day that I actually saw him perform live in person, and I was amazed at how good this guy actually was. He was an amazing performer.
Oh, no doubt about it. We're talking to Dave Hebler, the human mongoose. There's a quote, David. David Hebler is the mongoose in human form with awesome speed. David, how did the word come about that Elvis wanted you in his circle and finally to be his bodyguard?
He asked me.
Wait, he just said
he came.
He just said
he came to my school in Glendora, California, for a visit, and he presented me with a TCB necklace. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, that was Elvis's motto, and all of his people actually wore that necklace. And he asked me to be, to be his bodyguard and to, basically become a member of the Memphis Mafia, as we were called. And I, at the time, I was just going through a divorce, and I thought that would be a great way to meet girls. So I said, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, he was very personal, didn't let many people into his circle. Why do you think you were one of the few chosen?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, Elvis was very personal, didn't let many people into his circle. Why do you think you were one of the few chosen?
I don't know. I think we just kind of hit it off, right from the start. He really liked the way I moved, and I think he liked my attitude. I really wasn't looking to get anything from him. I never asked for any money. I never asked for a car. I never asked for furniture. I never asked for anything, frankly. And we had opportunities to, sit down together privately over the years and have, various conversations, between friends. That was. Basically, that was it. Elvis was a really fun kind of guy. I mean, he enjoyed doing things, and he enjoyed. He was inquisitive. He enjoyed different viewpoints about different subjects, and I'm the same kind of personality. So I guess that kind of clicked.
So, David, you must have so many stories. Anyone you can share with us in which you had to use force to protect Elvis?
Yeah, you want to hear a funny one?
Go ahead.
Okay, well, first off, one of the most popular questions I've received over the years, if you can imagine, comes mostly from guys, and they'll say something like, Elvis's bodyguard, huh? I'll bet that was a pretty cool job, huh? And you might think so, and of course the folks listening to me right now, you might think so too. But in truth, it was a horrible job. I mean, it was awful. It was the worst job I ever had in my life. I mean, think about it. Everywhere we went, there were hundreds of love-starved women just doing their best to try to get next to Elvis, and it was my job to keep them from doing that. I mean, I often had to sacrifice my own body to protect his. Terrible job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so stressful. Talk about stress.
Yeah. So, actually the bodyguarding was mostly that, keeping women, from, jumping them, which is what they all wanted to do. So, and you had to do it without hurting anybody either. That was the trick. If anybody was going to get hurt, it would be me, frankly.
So what was your daily routine schedule being an employee of Elvis? What was your daily routine, the schedule?
Well, when we were on tour, all four of us bodyguards worked. I mean, we were all on the job, and we were on the job 24/7 as long as that tour was happening. When the tour was over with, and Elvis was in Graceland, basically, we would switch off. Two of us would go home. At the time, I lived in Southern California. So I would go home for a couple of weeks, and the guys that were in Memphis, they would be on the job. And then we would switch off. So they would get some time with their family as well. So we kind of rotated that way, which worked pretty good.
And David, during your alone times with Elvis, what did he enjoy talking about? What do you think he most feared in life? Did he ever, speak to you about those type of things during your alone times with him?
Oh man, we talked about everything. I can recall a number of conversations. I can tell you the one story, part of a story that I usually tell when I'm on stage is, the number one question I've received over the years from folks is, what was Elvis the person really like? Well, if you think about it, that's a difficult question. How the heck do you answer that? I would have trouble explaining what Dave Hebler is like, never mind, Elvis Presley. So I thought, how do I answer that question? And it came to me that everybody knew that Elvis was a very generous human being. And that's true. He was. I mean, he gave away cars and money and boats and trucks and, clothing and jewelry and, everything under the sun to all of his friends and family and sometimes to complete strangers. He really, really was in truth, was an amazingly generous human being. And I can recall one conversation that we had. We were driving around Memphis, and I forget who was driving the car, but Elvis was sitting in front, and I was sitting in the back. And we're just driving around, and we're telling stories, talking about girls, and laughing and telling jokes, and we're just having a good time in good company. And all of a sudden, Elvis said to me, "Dave, I want to buy you a car." And I said, "Well, that's nice, Elvis, but you don't have to do that." He said, "Yeah, I know I don't have to buy you a car, but I want to buy you a car." I said, "Elvis, you just bought me a Mercedes a year and a half ago. You don't have to buy me a car." And the next thing I know, there's a gun stuck in my face. And Elvis said, "You're going to take this bleaking car or I'm going to blow your bleaking head off." And I went, "Whoa." Okay, Elvis, I didn't know you were serious. Okay, I'll take the car. So
we're talking to author Elvis Presley's personal bodyguard, David Hebler. David, where were you the day of Elvis's death? Can you walk us through what you remember of that day from morning until night?
Oh, yeah, I can. I remember that with absolute clarity. I was, when Elvis died, Red and Sonny and I had been gone for almost a year. And I was at home in Southern California and returning to my home in San Clemente with my wife's birthday gift because it was her birthday. And I was driving down the freeway, actually in that Lincoln that he had gave me. And I heard on the radio that Elvis Presley died. And, I was stunned. And, I'm talking to the car radio. I'm going, "What?" And anyhow, so I just found a spot and pulled over on the side of the freeway and listened to the radio for a while, telling the story. And I said, "Oh, my God, I couldn't believe it." But that had to be true. So I continued on my journey for took me another 15 minutes or so to get home. And by the time I got home, and parked in my garage and got into, our condo, the phone was ringing off the hook. I mean, every news agency on the face of the planet was calling me. I just refused to take calls. And then the doorbell rang. I went down and answered the door, and there's a valet with a limo driver standing there. Can I help you? And he said, yeah, I'm here to take you to this TV show to be interviewed. And I said, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. So I didn't. I went back into the house, and I just stopped answering the phone. I didn't know what to do. My wife was astounded as well as I. It ruined her birthday, obviously. And then it turned out that I got a call from Sonny, and he had arranged for a press conference the next day in Beverly Hills, and would I accompany him, go with him, and to be interviewed? And I said yes, so we did. We had that interview, and there must have been 50 reporters in that room, and they were hostile. I mean, they really were. And I remember with clarity the last question that one of the reporters asked me, actually, said, well, yeah, sure, you loved Elvis, you were his bodyguard, and you tried to protect him, and you knew all this stuff was going on, then why didn't you protect him? And I blurted out, protect him? How do you protect somebody from himself? And that was the end of the interview. That sentence actually, became famous. I mean, people used to recognize me from that statement. They would say the statement to me. How do you protect somebody from himself? So, I don't know if I want to be known, for that, but nevertheless, right. That's the way it happened.
David, a question that comes to mind, what has always been your feelings on all the conspiracy theories after Elvis's death, that he was still alive or that he's been seen and spotted? What has always been your feelings on that conspiracy theory?
The first, it's baloney. It's not true. But I understand the desperation of some segment of the Elvis fan base who just want with every fiber of their being for Elvis to be alive, for him not to be dead. I understand that they want that, but they're deluding themselves, of course, because he is dead. And that's all I can say about that. Fans have different, they come up with the craziest stuff every once in a while. Basically, the way I try to explain it is that, look, you all think stuff about Elvis, and the truth of the matter is Elvis the person, I mean. And the truth of the matter is that you know everything about Elvis the performer, everything about Elvis the movie star, everything about Elvis, the singer. But you don't know about Elvis the person. And the reason why you don't know, the primary reason why you don't know about Elvis the person, is because you weren't there. And because you weren't there, then you cannot possibly have firsthand knowledge. So the knowledge you do have is secondhand. Some of that knowledge is true. Some of that knowledge is not true. And some of that knowledge is kind of true. And that's it.
Yeah, I have a couple of minutes left, David. I know you've written several books. You want to speak a little bit about a few of your published works?
Yeah, my latest book was self-published last year. It was called The Elvis Experience, and it basically was my story, the story of me and my adventures with Elvis Presley. And it's kind of an interesting story. I did it in a series of vignettes. Actually, it's kind of a funny book. You know, I tell fun stories, although I don't back away from the negative stuff. I try to show the positive side, the fun side, the good times that we have. And I have chapters like the gunslinger, the kid with the watches, the ninja lady, the crazy ladies, just fun stuff that happened while we were on tour and at home, and the things that fans did, to get attention or get to meet Elvis, and the interactions that were back and forth, and it was pretty well received, actually. It was reviewed in the Elvis Information Network, which is an organization out of Australia, and they're the gold standard when it comes to all things Elvis. And they gave me a pretty darn terrific review, on the book, which basically I was enormously pleased, at the way the book was received by people. And so after 42 years, I finally got a chance to tell my story.
And with 30 seconds left, David, if anyone wants to purchase your books, where can they go to purchase your books?
Amazon.
Amazon.
The Elvis Experience. Yeah,
on Amazon, The Elvis Experience. And just my last question, with this horrific virus going on, if the king of rock and roll was alive today, what do you think he would say about this? What do you think? Do you think he would hold charity events?
Yeah, I think he would. I think he would try to help in any way that he possibly could. He was that kind of guy. I mean, he would. I know for an absolute fact that's what he would do. He would be giving, the kind of online stuff that you're capable of. He would be capable of doing, which he wasn't capable of doing back in the day, but he sure could do it now. And I think he'd do it.
Well, David, they're telling me I have to cut it short. I appreciate the time. Stay safe, and let's do it again.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the time.
Take care of yourself. That was David Hebler. Until next week, happy collecting to all.